of the Earth's surface would hit the jar.
There was a vertical rod inside the jar, balanced carefully with a weight at its top end. This is known as an inverted pendulum.
The seismograph worked by having an inverted pendulum inside it that basically toppled over, and by toppling over in one direction or another, it would impact with a ball, and the ball would fall from the side of the seismograph, giving an indication from which direction the earthquake had actually come.
The inverted pendulum is an ingenious device. It stands motionless until the slightest vibration sends it toppling over, indicating the direction of the epicenter.
We can all picture what a conventional pendulum is if we think of a grandfather clock swinging. It has a pendulum swinging inside it. An inverted pendulum is the exact opposite, where you have a pivot underneath and you're trying to balance that from underneath.
But there is another discovery from ancient China that, like the seismograph, is also vital to us today. A technology that delivers the ultimate power source of the modern world: oil drilling. Today, we assume that it was modern engineers who pioneered the art of deep drilling technology. Yet, incredibly, the techniques for today's supplies of oil and natural gas were actually reinvented from Chinese machines of 2,000 years ago.
It's amazing to think that it's 2,000 years ago the Chinese were using the same techniques to drill for salt and for natural gas that we're still using today.
The sheer size of the ancient drilling machines was remarkable. Derricks, also known as heaven carts, would rise over 180 feet above the ground. Images which we associate today with the landscape of Texas would not have been uncommon in ancient China. Amazingly, examples of these ancient industrial machines still exist in some regions of China today. This allows scholars a first-hand glimpse of the devices used in these ingenious super-scale machines. The drilling rig is constructed from heavy-duty bamboo with the drill suspended by cables. A team of workers stood on a wooden plank lever, much like a seesaw, and this lifts up the drill head made of iron. The pipe is allowed to drop until the drill bites on solid rock and begins to pulverize it. The bamboo cable used in the machine is extremely strong. In fact, its tensile strength is comparable to modern-day steel. The drill stem is pulled from the hole using a large wheel, somewhat similar in appearance to that on a modern flexible cable downhole tool truck. This rig was extremely versatile. To deal with the different rock types, the Chinese even produced a series of drill bits, specifically modified to the different geologies and rock types found in different areas of China. Using these drilling techniques allowed the workers to reach the depths of the earth where salt, natural gas, and oil were at their richest. When extracted from the wells, the gas was raised several feet above ground level and then distributed for hundreds of miles by an elaborate network of pipes. But it was to be in the Song dynasty at the turn of the first millennium that the rate of industrialization in ancient China reached its zenith. Inventors and engineers were creating colossal, incredibly advanced machines on a scale not seen in the West for more than 1,000 years. And the machines they invented used many of the same techniques in manufacturing that we still use today. As well as advances in technological engineering and manufacturing, this period produced the first industrialization and mass production of a substance that would change the world irreversibly. The Song dynasty lasted from 960 to 1279 AD and was based in the Henan region in eastern China. The dynasty launched a 300-year period of economic growth, coupled with great artistic and intellectual achievement. It was during the Song period that the four great inventions of papermaking, printing, the compass, and gunpowder were further developed, technologies that spread across the globe and changed the world permanently. Of these four great inventions, perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Song dynasty was the development that combined three simple chemicals into the most explosive change in world history: gunpowder. This single-purpose but multi-use mixture not only revolutionized warfare, but has led to rocket and missile development, and even the first few steps on a journey of exploration that has put man on the moon. But this period was also marked by stunning advances in manufacturing. In particular, one such area of innovation was in heavy metal manufacturing. In the province of Shantung, one recent discovery has given us remarkable insight into the metal forging abilities of ancient China. It is the remains of a giant cast iron pagoda that dates back to the Song dynasty. What makes these iron structures so incredible is that casting massive pieces of iron is a challenge even today. How the ancient engineers managed this amazing task is something we find hard to comprehend. To produce and cast quality iron on a mass scale, iron workers today constantly need to keep a massive volume of molten liquid at a very high temperature so as to allow the liquid metal to be poured. The same was true 2 millennia ago. One way to raise the temperature in a furnace is to blow air in, exactly as we might do when we fan the flames of a barbecue or use bellows on a fire. Modern ironworks use the same principle, but they use electrical air pumps to feed the fire. But how might the ancient Chinese have devised a method of driving massive volumes of air to heat their furnaces? An intriguing discovery at an ancient site has recently given archaeologists clues that automated air bellows machines were in fact in use. Drawing on the technological knowledge of their predecessors, who had begun to use water as a motive power, we now believe that engineers created a mechanical system for the operation of the blast furnace bellows.
To generate the kind of heat required in a blast furnace, you need quite considerable volume of air. It doesn't need to be incredibly high pressure, but there needs to be a lot of it. And what the Chinese did is they modified a traditional water mill, and they developed a system of bellows which are operated by cranks worked by the water-powered wheel.
Dr. Geraint Owen is a specialist in mechanical design and engineering at the University of Bath in England.
Using a water wheel as the starting power source, and you want to drive a bellows, you can drive it using a crank, and where you have a central axle and an offset pin and some form of connecting rod and link. So the water wheel will turn the crank in a rotary motion, and then all that the crank does with its connecting rod is convert that into a linear motion that you can use to power the bellows.
This type of machine is similar in principle to the design of the piston in a steam engine or automobile, but operating in reverse. In the Chinese machine, the wheel turns to operate a crank, whereas the later steam engine would use a piston-driven crank to turn the wheel. The ancient Chinese understanding of engineering allowed automated continuous air blasts to create the high temperatures needed for successful iron casting. Hand in hand with a mastery of casting came other mechanical innovations that were also centuries ahead of their time. The Song dynasty also produced advances in mass automated manufacturing and high-tech sophisticated machines, some of which laid the groundwork for much modern machinery. One such invention is the ancient world's version of the odometer.
An odometer is a simple device that allows you to measure distance in exactly the same way as you have an odometer on the dash of your car.
But could the Chinese have invented the gearbox more than a millennium before the modern engine? This fascinating ancient device is known as the rangefinder chariot. The cart, when pulled alongside a marching army, would signal the passing of every 500 yards with the banging of a drum. This model is a small-scale version. The actual odometer was much bigger.
The real-size chariot is very big. What you see now is a mini-sized model. We rebuilt this according to the ancient texts.
历史文献记载的。
The toothed gears in the machine are driven by the chariot's wheel. It uses what is described by modern engineers as a reduction gear train, a system that lowers the output speed so that one or more pins can revolve slowly, releasing catches at predetermined intervals to trigger the striking of the drums every 500 yards. Experts believe the machine was used to lead the emperor's royal guards on military assignments, to record the distances of enemy camps, or even to measure how far the army had marched from the royal city.
When the wheel outside is turned, it drives a small standing gear wheel inside. The large gear wheel drives a small gear flywheel, which again drives a large wheel. A lever on the big wheel will trigger the string to hit the drum when the wheel has turned enough. Now, the little lever is in a position to be triggered. It is triggered, and the string on the drum is hit.
What is remarkable about this odometer is that its gear systems match those in today's motorcycle engines precisely.
One of the keys to the range-finding chariot was the gear system within it, and here is an example showing a section motorcycle engine, and this engine is currently in bottom gear, and you can see that you need a number of turns of the engine in order to make the output sprocket of the motorcycle go along. So this is gearing down the speed of the engine to the speed of the sprocket. The same would have happened in the range-finding chariot, only that it would have been an even greater reduction, so that you would have had for every 500 yards, the main wheel with the trigger would have just turned once.
This type of machinery demonstrates that the Chinese possessed an early understanding of the elements that are used in jack work in today's modes of transport. But there is intriguing evidence of the application of gear engineering on a massive industrial scale during the Song dynasty. One discovery in particular has caused us to rethink everything we thought we knew about ancient manufacturing. We now know that the Chinese had fully operational huge factories, capable of mass production. The zenith of ancient Chinese innovation took place during the Song dynasty, which lasted from 960 to 1279 AD and was based in eastern China. The dynasty launched a 300-year reign of incredible inventions and machines. These inventions revolutionized warfare and would even lead to man exploring space, using navigational instruments that guided mankind's journey of discovery. Only now are we discovering that these intriguing machines fundamentally match the principles of today's modern technology, causing us to ask, did we invent modern machines, or did we just reinvent them? At the height of the Song dynasty in the 11th century, huge metropolises had begun to develop and were becoming centers for trade, industry, and commerce. These cities, with populations of hundreds of thousands, required automated machines that could increase the output of production. One such ancient industrial machine that has recently been discovered by archaeologists is the hydraulic trip hammer, believed to have first been developed as long as 2 millennia ago. Today, in the province of Jingdezhen, an example of this extraordinary 2,000-year-old technology is still in use, a testament to the machine's effectiveness and design.
A trip hammer is a good example of one of these water wheel powered devices. Basically, you have a large mass that is supported by a cam, and as the cam is rotated, the mass is lifted and then the mass is allowed to fall.
The system is amazingly advanced for its time. The machine actually consisted of several hammers, which were operated by a series of cams or lugs on the main revolving shaft. The hydraulic machine converts the kinetic and gravitational potential energy stored in running water into rotational power in a water wheel. The wheel is attached to a long transverse axle. There are several wooden boards inserted into the revolving shaft, with each board controlling one hammer. The wheel causes the shaft to rotate, which in turn moves the lugs. As they turn, these lift the hammers. When they have turned 60 degrees and the hammer is at full height, they release the heavy mallet, which falls and pounds the material below. Each hammer could crush with 100 pounds of force, meaning that all 8 hammers would operate a total of 800 pounds of force in a single rotation. The ancient texts tell us that this mega machine was adapted to not only crush grain, but to pound metal in industrialized automated metal workshops, just as we still use today.
The labour-saving potential is enormous. Instead of perhaps having to have 5 or 6 blacksmiths, each with a 10-pound sledgehammer, you could have one 70, 80, 100-pound, 200-pound mass being lifted and dropped a considerably bigger distance, and this could be then used by just 1 or perhaps 2 men working, and that saves you labour but enables you to make bigger things as well.
Today, the remains of mega water wheels which powered the hammers still litter the landscapes of rural provinces, offering a fascinating glimpse of what these hydraulic machines actually looked like. But the Chinese soon invented a more efficient way to grind grains, using millstones. The grain is crushed under a massive stone weight. This is a tried and tested technique, but the ancient Chinese took the technology to an advanced level. This machine is called the multiple-geared grist mill. As with the trip hammer machine, the multiple-geared mill was also powered by water. However, this machine harnessed the power of the water wheel to drive a complex angled gearing system and power 9 separate 2-ton millstones. Remarkably, the engineers devised an advanced system that transferred the water power via the drive shaft across a 90-degree angle change to drive the millstones.
We have this one enormous wheel which has got a shaft fixed to it, and on this shaft are a whole series of gears which are providing the motive power, and then from these there are a series of right angle gears which are changing the direction of the rotation and allows a whole series of different millstones to be driven off one shaft. This is a very economical way of generating the required power.
What is stunning is that this type of gear-powered water mill developed in ancient China incorporated technology that would not be seen again for nearly 1,000 years.
What we're looking at really is almost a precursor of the Industrial Revolution. This was industrialization on a scale which we would recognize today.
The sophistication of ancient Chinese gear technology was highly advanced, but there is even more evidence that the Chinese had a long tradition of ingenious geared machines. Beautiful engraved jade rings were discovered in tombs dating back to 400 BC. The spiral design on the rings is what has intrigued scholars. Incredibly, after studying the design, archaeologists believe that the only possible way to produce the precision spirals must have been using a machine. A device known as a compound machine is one that synchronizes rotational with linear motion. This means that as one part of a machine turns the disc, the other draws the line in perfect synchronicity with a geometric accuracy that is impossible to do by hand. Richard Windley has been studying the finds from ancient China and has created a model of a compound machine capable of such precision designs.
To produce this kind of curvature would really need a machine which was capable of rotating and moving in a linear fashion at the same time. This is what we call a compound machine. I've actually built a small model which will demonstrate this process. It consists of a turntable on which a blank or disc to be marked out is mounted, and a linear rod which moves across it. This rod holds the pen which is going to mark out the spirals, and by moving the rod backwards and forwards, the pen traverses the blank as the blank is actually rotating, and this produces what is known as a true Archimedean spiral. But what we also have is a gearing system which relates the movement of this bar and the movement of the turntable in a very controlled mathematical method.
There are 2 uprights attached to the end of the bar that moves the pen across the blank. These uprights are attached to a string which is wound around a disc under the device. So as the bar moves back and forth, the string turns the disc in perfect sync. It is this disc that rotates the blank and creates the perfectly synchronized designs.
I'm now going to load the little bamboo brush with drawing ink. Since these rings would have a series of flutes, they varied in number. In my case, I've got 8 divisions, so we'll repeat this 8 times, and that should give us the perfect, complete design.
We now know that this type of compound machine may have been used to mark the jade by the direct action of a diamond-tipped stylus. Over thousands of years, technological innovations filtered slowly but steadily from the advanced East to the West, carried through Central Asia over the 4,000-mile Silk Route. But there is a single extraordinary archaeological find that gives us a unique insight into the capabilities of ancient Chinese engineers and craftsmen. The find was only discovered 30 years ago and is so important that it is considered by many to be the 8th wonder of the ancient world. Many ideas and processes for technological masterpieces are simply lost to history. But there are intriguing artifacts that survive from the ancient world, which provide tantalizing evidence that incredibly complex techniques actually existed thousands of years before the modern age. The extraordinary first emperor of China's terracotta army is startling evidence of the magnificence and grandeur of the ancients. It is located in eastern China, and today it is considered by many to be the 8th wonder of the ancient world.
The discovery of this tomb and the excavation of it is one of the top archaeological finds of the whole world. It's as important as the pyramids, if not more important, and though there are many, many tombs in China, nothing like this scale is seen in any other part of China.
Buried near the Emperor Qin's tomb to defend him in the afterlife, ancient Chinese craftsmen and engineers created over 8,000 warrior statues of stupendous quality. What is even more stunning is that these warriors are actually armed with over 10,000 fully functioning lethal bronze weapons. Warriors of the age would use copies of these exact weapons to engage in hand-to-hand combat with their enemies. Over 2,000 years later, these weapons still have the capacity to inflict enormous damage. What is particularly stunning is that these weapons, along with the warriors and their body armor, were mass-produced in metal forging factories in ancient China. But how did the emperor's engineers approach the complexities of high-quality mass production? And what technology was used to create some of the world's most beautiful and complex objects?
Each figure is individually sculpted, cast, polished, showing the sort of production techniques which were not generally introduced in Europe until the 18th century.
The sheer scale of the discovery is mind-blowing, and even today, some 30 years after the initial finds, archaeologists are still uncovering hundreds of ancient weapons and artifacts. One of the most unbelievable finds from the excavations so far is what has become known as the Emperor's Chariots. These full-scale chariots are believed to be the vehicles for the Emperor's inspection tours in his afterlife. Investigations into their production have revealed that during the Qin dynasty, the Chinese, through careful practice and detailed research, had established highly advanced scientific standards for metallurgy and metal production.
The bronze chariot could indeed present the highest achievement during the bronze casting history in ancient China. These 2 chariots were each made of 3,000 components. Every single component was made alone and combined together later with others.
In total, the Emperor's chariots have 3,642 separate components of gold, silver, or bronze. What is particularly remarkable is that each was individually cast, before assembly. It would have been like hand carving all the pieces of a 3,500-piece jigsaw puzzle separately, while never being able to match each piece to any of its neighbors until the project was complete, all the while ensuring the fit was perfect. Most of the joins are created using a technique known as cast welding. Welding is a technique of joining two pieces of metal using extremely high temperatures and a welding material, or solder, to create a very strong bond. Cast welding of iron is very difficult, even today, as cast iron has a carbon content 10 times that of steel, and this high carbon content causes the metal to flake. Managing the temperature of the process is the way to ensure success, and this requires a highly advanced knowledge of critical temperatures and the properties of metals. Inlaying was also used. This is a complicated process that involves inserting a piece of one metal into a slot in another, a challenging technique that the ancient Chinese mastered. These were highly advanced techniques that we still use today.
I think the bronze chariots were not only an unprecedented achievement at the period, but also an achievement that could not be surpassed by any in the later dynasties and eras.
Today, the chariots and horses remain the largest find of fine bronzeware discovered in the history of world archaeology. But it is not only in the production of the emperor's chariots that sophisticated technology and engineering from 2,000 years ago are to be found. Every single soldier of the Imperial Guard was armed. Archaeologists at the site have unearthed an array of weapons, including spearheads, crossbow bolts, crossbow trigger mechanisms, blades of dagger axes that would have been mounted on 10-foot poles, and 37-inch long swords that are still razor sharp. The sheer scale of the number of weapons alone suggests that vast factories and workshops were in operation on a level of industrialization to match the factories of modern Western industrial cities. With meticulous detail, each weapon was cast and modeled to its standard shape, and then filed, chiseled, drilled, and polished. But there is one enduring mystery behind the discoveries of these marvelous ancient weapons. Incredibly, after 2,000 years, these bronze weapons still glitter. But how did the ancients create such metals that still preserve their strength and sharpness? Using cutting-edge electron probe microanalysis, archaeologists believe that the key to unlocking this ancient mystery may lie in the discovery of a dark gray layer covering the weapon's surface. Incredibly, the layer has been identified as chromium, a highly complex protective layer that wouldn't be developed in the West until the 1930s.
This layer was found to be a kind of oxide containing chromium. This means that in the Qin era, they had already mastered the technology to use chromium. In the modern world, the technology to oxidize chromium was invented in Germany in the 1930s and in America in the 1950s, whereas in China, people knew this technology as early as 2,000 years ago and put it into practice very skillfully. It is a remarkable achievement.
As research into the weapons continues, what other discoveries will be made that will cause us to reopen the history books on the development of highly complex materials? Despite the incredible advancement of the weaponry, it is the actual soldiers of the terracotta army themselves that still remain a mystery to modern scholars. How were they mass-produced on such an enormous scale, and to such an exquisite level of craftsmanship and casting skill? It is an accomplishment that has stood the test of millennia.
The making of the terracotta warriors is a real example of how China ran a semi-industrial society. In order to build this tomb, the emperor summoned 700,000 people to work at the site, and they probably worked for 10 years, possibly longer.
Modern scholars estimate that the construction of the terracotta army employed an organized labor force of nearly 3/4 of a million workers who worked for 10 years or more. That is the equivalent of the labor force of 40 automobile factories. In Lintong province, close to the emperor's tomb, a replication company has undertaken the challenge to recreate the warriors using ancient materials.
I think it is a very difficult thing to do, even nowadays. To make figures in the ancient time was much more complicated. Using the clay roll production method at that time, it would take 20 days for the whole process.
Once the clay is rolled, the artist builds the main structure of the warrior's body. Each figure is then sculpted with armor and an individual facial expression. Modern-day workshops, repeating the production process, have found that each warrior figure requires on average 300 pounds of clay, meaning that the craftsmen who created the terracotta army needed in the region of well over 1,000 tons of clay. No kilns have so far been discovered at the site, and the firing process remains an ancient enigma for archaeologists. Some scholars now believe that the molds of the warriors were encased within a temporary shell and were fired using a traditional kiln technique that reached high temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees.
A project of this scale at that time would have required large kilns, but it's a great shame that none have been discovered so far.
Once the temperature has climbed to its maximum, the mud's surface of the temporary shell cracks, allowing hot air to glaze and harden the figure. The results upon removing the shell are remarkable and offer a fascinating insight into the advanced understanding of ceramic and firing technology that was developed in ancient China over 2,000 years ago. What other mysteries will archaeologists uncover at this spectacular site? Ancient China was not only responsible for developing industrial machines and practices, for there was one inventor during the Song dynasty who created a machine that is nothing short of stunning. This machine would cement China's reputation of being at the cutting edge of ancient technology. It was known as the cosmic engine, the ancient world's astronomical computer. Although the inventors of ancient China made huge inroads into developing a vast range of mind-boggling technologies, there is one invention that stands alone as the embodiment of the Chinese expertise in science and engineering. And as was the case with the Romans and the Greeks, it was built by a Chinese innovator and genius way ahead of his time. A master of precision technology and a brilliant all-round engineer, his name was Su Song. Su Song's most amazing invention was so complex that for centuries its workings were an enigma to engineers and inventors. It was simply called the cosmic engine. It was a huge water-controlled astronomical cosmic computer that is such an incredible feat of engineering and science that few Western scholars believe it could have existed.
Su Song's water-driven cosmic engine was created in 1092 AD. It was considered to be one of the most splendid achievements in the history of ancient Chinese inventions.
Su Song's complex mechanism was designed to calculate time, not just hours and minutes, but the weeks, months, and seasons. The ancient Chinese understood that the calendar reflects the way the Earth moves around the sun. But what makes this machine truly stand apart is that the cosmic engine also calculated the way the Earth and planets moved through space. Furthermore, the ancient Chinese believed that the movements of the stars were closely related to the destiny of the country and its rulers. This ancient observatory in Dengfeng County, Henan Province, is China's oldest surviving astronomical observatory. Built in the 13th century, even today when the sun reaches its zenith, rays beam down this central drain.
After the rule of the Yuan dynasty unified China, he wanted to improve the development of agriculture. They want to make the reform of the old calendar so they can know the time when the farmers plant the corn. And every day he measured the shadow of the sun and made some recorder of the changes of the sun. Then according to the recorder, he made out a calendar. The calendar tells us it will take 365 days, 5 hours, 49 minutes and 12 seconds for the sun to go around the earth.
But 2 centuries before this intriguing observatory was built, Su Song was well on his way to designing and then building his astronomical computer. This would be a machine that would not only be able to calculate the passage of the stars and the Earth to tell time, but would also reveal to the world the technological sophistication of ancient China. This was a monumental task. How might Su Song realize such an ambition?
The cosmic engine is a huge 12-meter tall apparatus and very complicated inside. It includes 4 major systems built up by more than 400 parts. It is such a masterpiece of mechanical design and manufacturing and a marvelous achievement for the time.
Today, we know exactly how this mechanism was built because Su Song left us detailed blueprints in his treatise called A New Design for a Mechanized Armillary Sphere and Celestial Globe. This book was written 900 years ago.
This book is very precious to us today. It gives us the original blueprint, so researchers can clearly see the configuration of this ancient apparatus. The script contains 47 illustrations, including all the parts and their assemblage.
The Science and Technology Museum in Beijing, using the machine's original blueprint, has built a fully accurate reconstruction. The computer looked like a tower. The whole mechanism was 5 stories tall. On the front of the tower was a pagoda structure with each of the 5 stories having a door through which mannequins appeared ringing bells and gongs and holding tablets to indicate the hours and other times of the day and night. But how did it work? What ingenious innovations and technological developments did this incredible device use? A celestial globe showing the movement of the stars inside the tower turned in synchronization with a sphere just above it. As the celestial globe turns, so does the sphere. This meant that the analysts and engineers using the computer could compare and cross-reference between both globes and record multiple data. All of the time indicators were controlled by the same giant machinery, which simultaneously turned the sphere and the globe. Within the mechanism is the earliest example of an escapement in a machine, a concept essential to modern mechanical clockwork. In any form of clock-based machinery, power must be delivered to the mechanism in a precise fashion, which can be accurately regulated. The rationing of power is the function of this escapement, and is something Su Song solved successfully. Su Song included a cogged wheel in the system. Connected to this was a stopper that only allowed the cog to rotate at a specific rate, by stopping the rotation briefly and then allowing it to continue at a precise regular frequency. It is this ingenious system that allowed the invention of Western clocks centuries later. And in fact, it is the periodic stopping and releasing of the escapement that causes the ticking sound of any clock or timer today. Another ingenious aspect to the cosmic engine was its power source. A great scoop wheel using water and turning all the shafts working the various devices. This ancient mega machine ran from the 11th century until it was destroyed by political enemies of the Song dynasty. The cosmic engine is considered by some scholars to be the greatest mechanical achievement of the Middle Ages anywhere in the world. The Song dynasty would leave a legacy to science and technology, engineering and industrialization that would change the world irreversibly. Although ancient Chinese history is littered with evidence of complex machines, many ingenious designs were inconceivable and unbelievable to the West at the time. Through the decoding of texts and archaeological investigations into ancient Chinese knowledge, we must certainly admit that many of the inventions and discoveries upon which the modern